So what we've come up with up to this point is that we've looked at the development of the inner life, and I really liked what Jeff did, didn't you? You break that out and it's not nearly as confusing. I mean, not confusing at all. We'll make sure that you get that. So I had my unique personality. I received messages about myself. I developed an image and identity. I try to cover it up. I can't. I get angry, and I spiral down. Now, in this diagram, you understand the unique self that you bring with you, and you understand your flesh life, and you understand like messages. I wanted you to understand all of that before I ever talked about marriage. Because there's a lot of things around you that are stirring the pot and creating a storm in you. And if there's a storm in you, how do you deal with the storm outside of you? And so it's going to come to this point when we talk about marriage. Everyone in marriage reaches a Y at some point in their marriage. And you have to decide, where do you want to go? Do you want to go to the right and see God in this? Because the purpose of marriage is to make you miserable. Do you know that the first 21 years of Betty and I's life, we didn't have a single fight, we didn't have a single conflict, there was perfect peace, everything went perfectly for the first 21 years of our lives. And then we met. See, everything's fine until another comes. I was going so well until you came. I was going so well in my little house until you showed up. Relationships are the hardest thing to deal with that we'll ever deal with. And why do they push our buttons so? Well, I have to begin to see God in the whole thing and say, maybe you're going to use this person in my life to reveal some deep things in me that make me miserable, and also to reveal Christ in me, to show me what I can't do and what you can do, to empty me out so I live a supernatural life. Well, we all want to be loving and kind, and we want to be like Jesus, but don't bring me any experiences that make me like Him. Now, are you willing to go to the right and see God and say, what do you have in this for me? Because I'm learning a lot about myself that I really ought to fix up. And often when I'm doing marriage counseling, at this point I haven't talked about the marriage yet, and I'll just stop and I'll say, look, I've defined your self-life for you. And do you notice that nowhere on here did I ever mention your wife? And then I'll start numbering the problems. You're controlled by your personality here. You got all these messages as a kid. You get feeling all this. You're a big cover-up and you're full of idols. I never did mention your wife. Looks to me like you're messed up. You'd have been a daisy to marry. And do you ever think about that when you're with people and you're being annoyed that maybe you're just not the perfect person to be with either on a trip? And it's one of the things I like about the Abiding Life crowd. We get along better than any crowd I've ever seen. Betty says Abiding Life proves there's a place for everyone. Well, there is a place for everyone, and the hearts in the Abiding Life people I really like, because we see that we could have flesh. It's always in the back of our minds, so we're not walking around perfect. Every ministry has a center, and our center is exactly Christ through you. I remember traveling with a big evangelistic group, huge, and their standard that you had to reach, and if you reached it, you were a success, was evangelism. So we'd sit at the hotel at night, and they'd flay the help that brought the food up to you. And if it was wrong, and there wasn't enough ice in the glass, and this and that, and they were complaining all the time, and you got to the room, and they didn't like the sheets, and they didn't think it was clean enough, and could you come up and move us, and do this and do that. And they were complete asses, but they evangelized. And in between all that, we'd talk about who led who to Christ. Well, see, the standard in Abiding Life is exactly Jesus flowing through exactly you. And anything less than that isn't. Well, we've looked at all this self. Maybe you're not perfect to live with. And you notice I haven't mentioned your mate yet. Maybe you could go right with me on this and see what this marriage is revealing in you. Now, one of the things I'll warn you about when you do the marriage lecture, statistically, of course, in the church, it just now surpassed the world in the U.S., but 52% of Christians have been divorced. It's 51% in the world. Now, when you're sitting there and going through this and you're talking to people that have had a divorce, one of the things you want to be aware of is that they're going to sit there and say, oh, if only I'd known that. If only I'd done that. Well, I should have known that. Well, do you believe the day you believed in Him and He brought you in and He predestined your life? And everything in your life has brought you to the point so you could believe. And the real goal is I count all things in rubbish in view of the surpassing value of knowing Him. You won't exit this life with a marriage. There's no marriage in heaven. You know what? I'm not advocating divorce. People think I am, and I get accused of that all the time. And I get done, and I go, I've never advocated it. But people get one. Now what? Now what? Are you over? You done? That's it? And so the whole idea isn't to get people to go on a guilt trip and say, I could have done this, could have done this, could have done this. It's where you're at today. It's to learn where you're at today and take those experiences with you. So we don't want people going into guilt. But I don't want people going off here to the left, and I don't like it as defined that I'm trying to find my soulmate in this life. Someone that meets all my needs. And if I find them, maybe we can get tan pants and a checkered shirt together, and we'll both have our hair cut the same way, and then we'll walk around, and would it even be better if we're both named Pat? And we just like everything, and we got our little brown penny loafers on, and off we go, and we got matching bags, and the whole thing. I'm not looking for a soulmate like that. I don't even like me. So to try to find someone just exactly like me or to try to mold them into being me isn't right. That's not what I'm looking for. And I really believe if that's what you want, just get ready for the ride, because you're going to end in destruction down here and an explosion. And you can end in destruction and you can end in maturity over here. So we start out, and there's nothing in our lives that causes more conflict than marriage, than relationships. And so you're going to meet people at their point of conflict, and you'll have their ear when you talk about this whole relationship. And here's how we begin with it. We've understood the inner and the outer life, all of our own problems. Now, every relationship starts at a point of oneness. So you just sit and listen to this. Every relationship starts at a point of oneness. But we're carrying two invisible bags. In one bag is my flesh life, and in the other bag is my unique self. When I say that to you right now, what visual do you get of flesh life? What comes into your head after the lectures? Well.
Selfish, self-centered.
Well, something ought to come into your mind, self-life. I'm telling you, you're the lecturer, and you. The circuit diagram. Does that come into your mind?
Yeah, right.
So you've got that. You know what that is. You have an idea. Yeah. It's a definition for you, that diagram that we just finished. You remember.
Yeah.
And we've built a lot on that. We've done 5 lectures that brought us up to this point. So you're thinking about that diagram as we're talking, right? And now I've said in the other bag you have a unique self. What's coming into your mind? Yeah. Thinkers, feelers, doers, how they live differently, act differently. And you've already talked about that in the lectures. So now we sit here and we say the reason we want to talk about these is we start at oneness, but there's conflicts that take place between unique selves. You can have one behavior, and that one behavior can have 2 different motives. Give me an example of that. One behavior with 2 different motives.
Being quiet if you're angry, or being quiet if you're just having fun.
Yep. Or just being a thinker. Now, when we look at the other person, we'll judge. And when I'm quiet, if I'm angry, I'll assume what?
The other person is angry.
That they're angry. So, will my judgment be right? No. Now I misunderstand the person, and we start at oneness, and the thing we want to show is we begin to spread apart. So the number 1 point is we started at oneness. The number 2 point is we're carrying these 2 bags in with us. Number 3 is there's a conflict between personalities, which causes us to spread apart. Now, not only is there a conflict in personality, there's a conflict with the flesh. So, you grow up and you have a mother who's dominant. And she's in charge and she wears the pants and she rules and dad's passive. When you get married, what's your concept of marriage from your flesh in your past? Who's in charge?
Moderate.
Yep, mom's in charge. Now, you're a Christian and you want dad to take over, or you'd like your husband to take over. Are you going to be comfortable with him leading when you've never seen it? No, I'd question everything. Because I've never seen it happen before. I don't have a model. You came in with a model of marriage, and I don't have that model of marriage of a husband leading. So you tell your husband, lead because you're a good Christian, you ought to lead, and then whatever decision he makes, you question it to death. Because you want to make sure it's right and you've never seen it. And whoever has the last word always had the first word. And in that case, in that situation, you make sure you had the last word, but in the end, you really had the first word. Because you said, I'm going to let you lead, but when we're all done, you're going to lead the way I want you to. So I'll feel secure. The flesh life, because of your past experiences, collides. And now, that's point number 4, we spread apart a little bit more. Nobody got married and walked down the aisle and looked at each other and said, if we can really screw everything up, we'll go see Mike in a few years and it'll all be over. Nobody hopes for that. They really have good hearts. They really want to be married. They want to make the thing work. But if we don't understand these two bags, there's a constant conflict and collision. So we use the example, there's the little pill and the girl couldn't swallow it. Why? Because there was an invisible message attached to it. What message have you attached to your mate's behavior that they're not attaching? Those of you that are married, have you ever had your mate accuse you of something and you had absolutely no idea what they're talking about? Now, mind you, there's been plenty of times I've been accused of things I was doing and I didn't want to admit it, or I got proud and I said, I don't do that, you do that. I know that. But I'm talking about, have you ever been accused of something you have absolutely no idea what they're talking about? Well, it's pushing a button in them. It's something from their past that's bothering them. And if we go back to this diagram that we had, and you had a father who was always passive and always gone, and you felt insecure, then I'm leaving with the guys for a week, and what's it going to make her feel? Yeah, whenever Dad left, you felt abandoned, so now I'm leaving and you feel abandoned. And so then the accusation is, you want to abandon me. Do I want to abandon? No. I've just pushed a button from the past, and now there's a collision and we spread further apart. The next thing that happens is that you can have a conflict between your personalities and your flesh. And so you have a doer who likes risk, and you have a thinker that feels insecure. He's getting excited when there's no money, and she's panicking when there's no money.
That's true.
And so that's a huge conflict, and you spread apart a little bit more. So here's what I'm saying. You started a relationship, and both of you are carrying invisible bags. And this bag was my flesh life. We've covered that. We know what it is. And this bag's my unique self. We know what that is. We started at a point of oneness, and we began to have collisions because of personalities. And I've been judging you wrong. I may not even know you. And then we've got flesh life from our past that we bring in. So you push my little buttons. Then you have conflict between unique self and past. And you begin to spread apart and spread apart and spread apart until you reach a place called emotional divorce. And here's what emotional divorce is. With my mind, I run away from it because we're Christians. I can't divorce you. I can't leave you. We have kids, blah, 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 blah. Where would I go? What would I do? But in my emotions, I'm sick of you. I've had it. You'll never meet my needs. You'll never understand me. And you'll never be my soulmate. You're just going to keep those khaki pants and checkered shirt in the closet, aren't you? And you're never going to wear them with me. You'll never be my soulmate. And so then I'm in conflict because with emotions, I'm running toward divorce, and with mind I'm running away, and I'm like this, in constant conflict. One of the nice things, one of the things we try to get people to do is please admit where you are so you can leave where you are. And I'll say to men and women in my office, if you're emotionally divorced, please tell me that you are. I want to know that you're emotionally divorced instead of playing a game with me. Because here's what an emotional person will do. I'm already leaving you, and I'm not going to change how I feel. I feel you don't meet my needs, you don't love me, you don't care, you'll never try to please me. And so I've put you underneath a magnifying glass, and I'm making a list of your behavior to prove what I already feel. Now, your behavior at that point is predestined. You're hung. And so again, once the woman says, you are a manipulator. If the man sends flowers, he's manipulating to get something. If he doesn't send them, he's manipulating to get something. What do you do at that point? And when people have accused you of things, and I'm not just talking about in marriage, at work, at church, in the family, people get a concept of you, they feel this way about you, and somehow all your behavior just gets morphed into what they believe about you. And that's all they're going to hear. Well, do you see what that does to a woman when the husband's emotionally divorced, he's decided to go, he's comfortable being miserable. I've already decided what you're like, and in the garden, Adam and Eve wanted to know, and now I know. I know all about you. I know exactly what you're doing. I've analyzed you, and I don't want to move into the unknown because that'd be faith. And so I'm out to prove exactly what I know about you. Do you know what that is like when a guy's done that? Because he gives the wife a list of things to do that are wrong and would make him happy. She does them like mad, and he adds more. And so she does them like mad now and keeps all these, and then he gives her more. Do you know what? It's predestined. No matter what you do, it's not going to work. And that's where I'll ask a fellow, would you please be honest? I can deal with you if you tell me you hate her. And she can deal with it more easily if you tell her the truth. And the truth is, no matter what you do, I'm leaving. You know, one fellow did that, and he left his wife with this huge list to work on and abandoned her and moved in with another woman. I went over and saw him, and I said, brother, of all the things you've done, the most wicked thing, and I don't care if you're with another woman and you want to go get a divorce, and you do what you want to do, amen. But the most wicked thing you've done is left your wife with this list and didn't tell her the truth, and the truth was you wanted the other woman. You know, I took him over, he was so mad. And I said, tell her the truth. He goes, I wanted the other woman. Turned around and walked off. And I looked at her and I said, now you can at least rest. Because you don't have to go through this list on and on and on, because it's predetermined, it's predestined. And isn't it amazing, the person you married, the person you love, you've got them now under a magnifying glass, finding everything that's wrong in them. And we've said there's nothing the nearness of Christ won't fix in your life. So you got Christ here and problems here, and when He's your focus, the problems are there, but they don't overwhelm you. So if you have your eyes on your problems, you're done. And yet what I'm doing with my mate is making them focus on a problem. If I really wanted to see improvement, what would they focus on? Yeah, put their eyes on Christ. Put their eyes on Him. If they've really got a problem, put your eyes there. Get the first things right. And we don't get the first things right. We don't go for the first thing. Get the first things right. Calm this storm in everybody. Everybody take up the cross, deny yourselves, walk in it, and now have a talk about it. I'm not saying the issues aren't real. I'm not saying things don't need to change. You just have to have a foundation to stand on to see them change. Now, what we're trying to describe in this diagram is the experience of 99% of couples. I don't know very many people that didn't reach emotional divorce at some time. And I'm trying to move in the area of understanding and just say, I want you to understand what's happened. And could this be right? And so what we have, you came into the marriage with two invisible bags. Well, in this bag you had the flesh, in this bag you had the unique self. In your mind, you're thinking of all that means. And you've talked about it. Do you see how unique selves would collide because they're different and you see the world differently? You attach a different motive. You begin to spread apart from your point of oneness. Not only that, your flesh life is going to collide. You have different concepts of the world. You have different hurts. My behavior has a different meaning to you than it does to someone else. Are you ever amazed like me that you could spend the whole day with a woman and the whole day with her husband and enjoy both of them, but they can't spend 10 minutes together? They're not giving me all those negative messages. And you know, I have very good friends that their wives can't stand them. And I've got very good female friends that their husband can't stand them. And I know the people fairly well. I don't see that in them. Well, you just keep pushing my button because of the flesh. And I don't know why. I don't know why I'm doing it. You spread apart until you reach a place of emotional divorce. That is when my mind runs away from divorce, my emotions run toward. And now I put you under a magnifying glass and I make a list of everything to prove what I feel. That's hell on earth. And I had one fella, he actually made himself physically sick. Just physically sick. So he could he was leaving with one of his clients. Physically sick, so the doctor would say to him, finally, if you don't get out of the marriage, you'll die. So he comes to me, this is a life or death situation. And Mike, even you would have to agree that I'm going to die. And I said, well, there's two ways to die. You could take up the cross and deny yourself. You could do that too, but he just made himself that sick that now, what could you say to him? Are you a murderer? Am I the murderer for telling him to stay now? I said, brother, you know what you want to do? Go do quickly. and stop telling me that. So that's how that works. All right. What did you hear? Write that down in a couple of sentences. Sherry?
Me?
Yep. Just.
We begin at a point of oneness, but we each have two invisible bags we carry into marriage. Our flesh life we've developed in our unique selves. These begin to collide and to spread apart. If one person reaches the point of emotional divorce, his mind running toward the marriage, but his emotions running away, he will develop a list to justify the physical divorce.
Yep. And could I say to the person on the receiving end of this, I want to make it very clear, you didn't make a mistake marrying the person. Because we're both carrying our own bags. He made the mistake in the marriage. She made the mistake in the marriage. It's not that you made a mistake. So people live in regret endlessly, and they think that if they could have done things differently, they would have changed the other person's heart. Well, you don't. And so on the receiving end of that, you never sit there and say, I made a mistake getting married. But a lot of people make mistakes in marriages and make it miserable. In India, all my friends have arranged marriages. They're all pretty happy, aren't they? There's very few of them that aren't happy. And they met the people at the wedding. And the Indians' approach is this. There's not such a thing as a bad marriage. There's only bad people in a marriage that won't do the right thing. Because they go, we've got this proven. We have it down. We have 5,000 years of history that say this is how, if you're married, it'll work. Yeah, and you're personalizing that in your marriage. So.
Well, how can you not?
Yeah, you have to. Well, if you don't personalize it, it won't have any life in it if you don't personalize it. Right. That's a fact. It won't have life if you don't personalize it. Okay? So, both of you have different unique selves and you've collided. Do you notice the color I'm using, Amy? That was just for you. Okay, you had unique selves that collided and your flesh lives collided. You both brought those into the marriage. You didn't create them in each other. You started at oneness and you spread apart. Remember, you both brought them in, and now you reach this place of emotional divorce where you want to run from it because you really would like to sort it out. But then again, in your emotions, you get rubbed raw till the wind in the hall nearly irritates you, and you're in a conflict right there. Okay. Yeah.
Both don't necessarily have to reach the point of emotional divorce.
Oh, no, the other one will. What happens, all it takes is if this fellow gets here and you're down here and you don't know a thing about it, he's constantly pulling you up to this point. You're going to be pulled up because they want to bring you into their world. And the next thing you know, you're discussing things and making lists you never knew about until now. So somebody can go up there easily. That's why people ask a question. You've probably been asked this. Can you fall in love with more than one person? Can you?
Yes.
Can you fall in love with more than one person?
Yes.
Well, of course you can. That's why I don't date. You know, if you want to fall in love with somebody else, just date someone else. You know, and the thing is, God delivers you before, not in.
Yeah.
And so these people, and you know, the progression of an affair, and we can talk about that, which, you know, as you go, the progression of affair is accidental meetings, and then purposeful meetings, and then communication, and then sharing on a deeper level, and then attraction builds, and then the next thing you know, you have the physical side of it. So there's a progression as a person moves up this way. Well, you know, you draw the line where you don't want to go. Of course you can fall in love with somebody else. All you have to do is date them. And you look in a lot of the Catholic countries, there are millions of people, and Asians too, with mistresses. You know, just millions of them with mistresses. But yeah, you fall in love with somebody else. Well, once you've fallen in love with somebody else, you've compounded this whole diagram is compounded, because I got a vested interest to get you up here now and to get a list of behavior. And here's the thing, I've already chosen over here, and now I got to prove my choice was right over here.
Mm-hmm.
Would it just be fair to say, you know, I started dating the woman at work and I'm going to run off with her? I could live with that. But no, I got to give you a list how terrible you are, and you made me do this. So, you know, it isn't fair, it isn't honest. And here's another thing that's really interesting. They say that only about 3% of people who have an affair will marry the person they have the affair with. And the reason is their mate is meeting 80% of their needs, but not the 20%. And so what they'll do is they'll find the person that meets 20% of their needs and get an attraction going for them. The problem is, when it comes down to the rubber meeting the road, are you going to exchange a 20 for an 80?
Yeah.
And so they'll slowly try to back out of that. And now all of a sudden this woman was the other woman, and now this one becomes the other woman to her. Because the guy will start to get out of that, because he'll say, no, I'm not going to exchange 80 for 20. Okay, now, I haven't told you how to fix this. I'm just trying you to understand the dynamic. You know, the dynamic, if you can get on track with the dynamic here with us, that you do have a self-life down here, and you've both brought in your own bags and nobody created that in you. And just to understand that is what we want to do.